Hello and good evening, everyone. This is Eric Feng Fan. I'm an artist and art professor from Tsinghua University in Beijing, where I teach studio art and art history. Today, I want to talk about water and how water conservancy projects become a very important subject matter in Chinese contemporary art. So in Chinese contemporary art, the Three Gorges is a topical issue. With the recent flooding in southern China, the controversial issue has been yet again brought up. While paying attention to the Three Gorges phenomena in contemporary art scene and study the related collection, I like to look back to history, mapping out in the interactive relationship between the evolution of ideas, the artistic creation, and the social ecology under the clue of river governance. The 17-year period of China is an important era in Chinese contemporary history, when the development of national economy and the construction of infrastructure started with extreme impoverishment. Floods and droughts caused by river floods and natural climate change became the primary problem that have to be solved. The raising ecological awareness in Chinese art during the past 2 decades reveals 2 prominent characteristics: criticizing the social reality and a close connection with the traditional aesthetic idea and landscape paintings. In the case of Chinese eco art, it cannot be understood simply as a migration of global environmental and ecological art. While Western ecological art is more rooted in land art and earthwork, Chinese eco art has its root in studio art. As the artist's reflection on the domestic environmental problems. There was no prevailing land art or earth art to serve as a precursor of Chinese eco artists. Yet for all the contemporary artists are dealing with the social and historical issue in their work. Ecological consciousness in Chinese contemporary art is related to a revival of traditional culture and art since the 1980s, which has encouraged artists to focus on traditional ecological concerns and introduce them into their own work. Chinese traditional culture highly valued a harmonious relationship between human beings and nature. The unity of nature and man is the basic proposition in Chinese philosophy and aesthetics. For example, the great reverence of nature is exemplified by Taoist concepts, such as Tao is to follow and learn from nature, and the idea that nature is the most beautiful. And the Confucian metaphorical connection between a gentleman's virtue and nature express a similar idea. The unity of nature and man bearing the deep ecological concern of Chinese culture, but the significant influence on architecture, gardening, painting, sculpture, and literacy. In visual arts, traditional Chinese landscape painting, Shang, literally mountains and waters, epitomize the unity of nature and humans. Shui represents the mutual join between nature and humanity and embodies the organic synthesis of the humanization of nature and naturalization of the humanity. Water, along with often undepicted mist and sky, perform as a mysterious negative space in the picture. They surround the rock and pine trees, often to be described as qi, a force or vitality. Consider the sublime landscape of traditional Chinese aesthetic spirit. As shown in the slide, this work, done in 1072, is one of Song Dynasty's most famous masterpieces. As the title Early Spring suggests, one can see by forms emerging from the mist. The land seems to be awakened as the trees spring forth. Deep distance penetrates to either side of the mighty mountain as winding forms are complemented by the diagonal breaks of streams and waterfalls. This one, done by the same artist, the water and the mist of dawn gave form to a poetic image of a friend's reunion. A Taoist tradition that tended towards accommodation of nature's way. Another example, one of the four great masters of Yuan dynasty, Huang Gongwang's greatest surviving masterpiece, Remaring Mountain. It is a partial remain of dwelling in Fuchun Mountains, a hand-scroll painting depicting the artist's later retirement site. Being a Taoist himself, this work is a model of literary painting. According to Huang's own inscription on the hand scroll, it took him 3 to 4 years to finish this painting. It was not consciously constructed, but executed in a spontaneous state, as a form of leisure and self-expression. Again, the unpainted river formed a major compositional element in the picture. The spirit has evolved over 1,000 years till the Maoist era. The Maoist philosophy of struggle dominated Chinese ideology after 1949, which was implemented not merely in dealing with the class struggle in human societies, but also in dealing with the relationship between humanity and nature. The philosophy of struggle emphasized the infinite capacity of the human will to conquer the nature, commanding an extreme anthropocentric attitude toward nature. Mao and the party launched a series of economic and social policies and large development projects that transformed and degraded in the environment. Mass mobilization and political rewards for extreme sacrifice and physical labor undermined the traditional ideals of harmony, accommodation, and moderation. On May 8, 1958, Mao Zedong started the second meeting in the 8th National Congress of Communism Party in China. He said, "Making the mountains bow their heads and the river gave way. I consider such saying is really good. We advocate a unity of Russian revolutionary enthusiasm and American pragmatism. In literature, it is the unity of revolutionary romanticism and realism. The revolutionary ambition of man conquering nature is the common ground for both artistic practice and water conservancy projects. Integrating water conservancy projects into the new natural landscape painting in a way summarized the new visual experience of artistic expression on socialist construction." From the state regulation of major water systems, such as Huai River, the Yellow River, and the Yangtze River, to countless local operated state-subsidized projects of farmland water conservancy. The water conservancy projects in 17-year period epitomized nation's development. Furthermore, it is also a key period for the literary and artistic practice, where water conservancy projects became a critical issue for art creation and photojournalism. the transformed nature in artworks, also newly emerging art born in the process of transforming nature due to novel themes, objects of expression, and literary and artistic policies. Apparently, the tranquil and serene spirit of Shanshui painting was considered incompatible with the philosophy of struggle. The first all-China literature and arts worker representative Congress in 1949 has established the art for the workers, peasants, and soldiers proposed by Mao Zedong's speech in literature and art in Yan'an form as a literature and artistic guideline for the People's Republic of China. Nevertheless, the implementation of such remained a still perplex for artists who did not come from the previous liberated zone. Even for the artists who are from the liberated zone, it was still a new topic needed to be rediscussed under the new context of national construction on the basis of their own experience. Traditional landscape painting, while not banned outright, was overlooked. In fact, many artists with rigor traditional training of the Mao's era arguably volunteered to add telegraph poles, trains, and factory chimneys to traditional landscape paintings in praise of industrialization and modernization. In 1949, Chinese painting came to a historical crossroad. It was compelled to one direction. The cultural and fine art officials from the revolutionary bases like Yan'an took over the art institutions and schools all over China, ran by Mao's thoughts on art and literature to remodel the traditional scholars and artists. The historical context of Chinese painting is not artistic creation, but remodeling. In 1950, Li Keran, a leading artist in China, published on remodeling Chinese painting in the debut issue of People's Art magazine. Art needs realism. Despite the high achievement of traditional landscape painting, the relaxed and joyful works has nothing to contribute in the education of people or any other positive value. Xu Beihong, an important artist, wrote in his On Landscape Painting, published in Novel Construction magazine. Poet Ai Qing further specified the idea of new Chinese painting. In a paper titled On Chinese Paintings, he argues that new Chinese painting must renew the content and the form. In turn, to step out the studio to paint the real mountains and rivers. The so-called remodeling in their mind is to make the traditional painting to serve the reality and transform the scholar-like artist is the essential task. The other key point to this problem was literati painting, which used to be solely personal expression, had now become an instrument of revolutionary task. Such transformation determined each of the Chinese scholars must adjust themselves to adopt the change of the new reality. Yet, when the historical transformation landed on the brush tips of each individual artist, the complexity of this process is beyond imagination. In terms of artistic method, there exists a process of different and analyze the concept, differentiate and analyze of the concept and practice of the realism. The term realism was introduced into China by Qu Qiubai in the New Culture movement in the early 1990s, in the early 1920s. In the Mandarin context, realism, literalism, as well as the associate term naturalism, which has always been criticized, have often been interchanged and misused. In the literal sense, as a method, the spirituality of realism seems to be naturally legitimized compared to the literalism that mostly emphasized techniques. However, in the historical context of new cultural movement period, where literalism was regarded as a part of the Western science and technology, it is not difficult to understand the fact that such term once has taken precedence in China. In the book, Problems of Soviet Literature and Art, provides a definition of socialist realism in the statute of Soviet Union of Writers Association. Quote, as a basic method of Soviet literature and literacy criticism, it required artists to realistically, historically, and concretely describe the reality from the development of revolution. Meanwhile, the authenticity and historical specification of art must combine with the task of ideologically reforming and educating working class with the socialist ethos, end quote. Obviously, socialism has normalized and standardized realism. In 1953, in the Second Conference of Literature and Art Workers, clearly defined the socialist realism as a supreme guideline for the artistic practice and criticism in China. In the Second National Art Exhibition of China, held in 1955, there are a wide range of works on the construction showed ideological remodeling among Chinese painters. As we can see from the two examples, New Roads by Guan Shuanyue and Turn Harm into Benefit by Zhang Xuefu. This bittersweet transition can be vividly seen in a pair of mentor and student. The mentor, Wu Fan, was a painter and art collector in Shanghai. Using elegant brushwork and soft tones, Wu rendered the textures of both mountains and trees. And his work was known firmly rooted in tradition. As you can tell from these slides, the qi flows through among the spring mountains and sprouting willows. Reminds of the Guoxi's early spring, which you saw earlier. As for this one, you can see how the river remained unpainted, yet the water and the mist constructed a realm of tranquility, of a distance in time and space, a world of artist's literary spirit. However, all the virtues from the traditional canon that Wu represented was considered backward in the new Maoist era. From the former leader of Shanghai art scene, Wu soon became a common painter at the Public Art Academy after 1949. In his late period, Wu has painted this painting at the eve of the Cultural Revolution. It is hard to imagine what a tormented transition a painter had to experience, changing his art subject from pastoral to WMD. What is also worth mentioning is that Wu, as a prominent art collector, used to possess Huang Gongwang's Remaring Mountain, the crown jewel of Chinese literary paintings. Man must conquer nature, said Mao. The adversarial language and the metaphor of a war against nature thus provides a compelling theme for understanding human attitudes and behavior towards the environment in China during the Mao years. It is also an extreme case of the modernist and socialism understanding of human as fundamentally distinct and separate from nature. In 1950, the head of Ministry of Culture, Hu Qiaomu, said, quote, "The vast ground has now been occupied. It is time to embark on a solemn new construction on such position," unquote. Art is a powerful tool for representing socialist construction and growing new citizens. While artists are also inevitably being reshaped in terms of ideas and methods of artistic practice. No matter an individual or the types of work in production, including art, has become a revolutionary school during exploration of the development path of socialism. Collectivism became the moral principle in the revolutionized society, while the art practice gradually transformed into an organized activity. If it is true, as some environmentalists argue, that a core cause of contemporary environmental problems is a human failure to see themselves as part of nature, seeing nature rather as something external to be harnessed or overcome. The notion that the face of the earth could be miraculously transformed through ideologically motivated determination was repeatedly translated into policy and action during the Mao years. And the natural environment was devastated through the efforts of millions of laborers. The ambition of human beings to change and eventually completely triumph over nature was depicted in the countless grandeurs in visual artworks. In the first 10 years of the new era of the new China, Chinese painting is represented new elements in mountains and water century paintings. After 1958, with the Great Leap Forward Movement campaign, the theme of Chinese painting shifted into human activities. From people's commune, big rice pot system, and abandoning piecework rates, etc. The economic terms became the title of many artworks. The transformation of artistic subject has embodied a socialist alteration. The change of scholars' mind resulted in change of artistic taste. Therefore, the country's transfiguration brought by the new social ideology is defined by the new look of its art. Ancient legends speak of floods and droughts. China's legendary first ruler, Yu the Great, is said to have built hydro projects for flood control more than 4 millennia ago. Vulnerability to forces of nature helped establish the importance of water conservancy projects to ward against the famine and as a primary responsibility of imperial administrators. The Mao era effort to conquer nature and water can thus be understood as an extreme form of demonstration of power and determination, as well as declaration of legitimacy. In October of 1952, Mao Zedong's first ever inspection tour after taking over power. He made an instruction of, quote, "We must see to it that Yellow River is well harnessed," unquote, in Kaifeng, an ancient city known for suffering from Yellow River's flooding historically. In 1954, a great flooding of Yangtze River endangered Wuhan city. The long-scroll flood fighting of Wuhan, made by Li Xiongcai, became the first major work that represented the construction of mass water conservancy projects. Later that year, New China's first independent design dam, Foziling Dam, was completed. A series of work of art was made to celebrate this event. Guanting Reservoir Dam, located at the northwest suburb of Beijing City, was New China's first major conservancy project near the capital. With the construction of the Ming Tombs Reservoir in the late 1950s, due to significance of their location and political symbolism, a great number of artworks, journalism photographs of these conservancy projects were made to manifest the new look of this new reign. The rapid development of heavy industry started the country down to a path of environmental problems. Sanmenxia Dam is the most iconic one. It was the first major water project on the Yellow River and constructed with manual labor. This Soviet-designed dam heralded an era of development projects in which human will was considered more powerful than objective scientific law. Unfortunately, few engineers and scientists dared to speak up that damming the mainstream of the Yellow River was ecologically and socially unwise. So the decade-long national campaign of large-scale hydraulic projects has begun. In the art world, many artists have adopted the subject matter. Some of them made a career out of it. Song Wenchi, the student of Wu Fan, is one of them. Since 1959, Song has made 7 major works of Sanmenxia Dam, recorded the process of the dam's construction. The painter received great professional reputation from the success of the series. It became one of his representative work. Song's great changes in the mountains and rivers took a more radical move than his contemporaries. One can barely see any traditional formal language in his work. Great reputation brought some questions and criticism. Quote, Song's new work took great effort in depicting the grand scene of Sanmenxia construction site, yet it failed to attract the audience. For it's merely a plain documentation than a piece of poem. Yu Feng, a senior painter, wrote in his Note on Viewing New Look of Our Mountains and Rivers exhibition, published on the issue 4 of Art Journal in 1961. With the motif developed, the dam in Song's work is fading away from the viewer. In the 1960s version, the nature surrounding of the man-made structure has returned and took a more important role. The terrace, symbolized the alteration of the nature terrain, has been introduced in the painting to further indicate the great change in the mountains. together with a pole standing prominently on the top of the mountain. They signify the successful results of the dam's completion. When the artists praising the achievement of the state, impacts of the sediment accumulation has caused severe flooding on the upstream, let alone the humanitarian crisis caused by the forcible relocations. The sole dissident at that time, hydrologist Huang has been sent to hard labor for openly opposing the project. Urgency to achieve progress led to the repression of expression and other intellectual freedoms, suppressing the free speech and the local traditions, and disruption of connections to the land exacted an enduring toll on the human and natural worlds. Maoist era provides an example of extreme human interference in the natural world, in an era in which human relationships were also and usually distorted. The environmental dynamics of the period suggest a congruence between violence among human beings and violence by humans towards non-human world. The militarization of human society in the war against foreign and domestic enemies was matched by a militarization against nature that helped promote modernization projects that transform the landscape and degrade the environment. Moreover, because of the time lags between activities and their consequences, subsequent generations are still paying for the efforts of Mao's policies. As the consequences unfolds over the years, Chinese contemporary eco-art artists are now dealing with not only the degraded environment, but also the policy and the cultural surroundings of it. Mao era represents a sharp departure from what came before and what followed with the economic reforms. After Mao era, China's contemporary environmental problems remained linked to its authoritarian system, recent history, cultural traditions, and national character. The reaction to Mao's eras was promoted disillusionment and certainty over land tenure and other property rights. And the problems with corruption and enforcement that have often exacerbates the negative effects of industrialization and deterred sustainable investments. In the new millennium, despite China's public commitment to resolving its environmental problems, the shadow of Mao era hangs over China's environmental policies, including the Three Gorges Dam on the Yangtze River, one of the world's largest power stations, which some consider to be a monument of Communist Party hubris. It can be understood in the context of Maoist mega projects that aim both at mastery of nature and suppression of human rights. In 2008, art historian Huang curated an exhibition, Displayment, The Three Gorges Dam and Contemporary Chinese Art, at Smart Museum of Art in Chicago. The exhibition presented works of 4 Chinese artists, Chen Qiulin, Yunfei Ji, Liu Xiaodong, and Zhang Hui, whose different practices have engaged with the theme of movement of people, demolition of Old Town, and astonishing changes of the landscape. These works showed a clear tendency of environmentalism and criticism toward the authority. Another important Chinese artist, Shang, has touches on this subject matter as early as in 2003, the year Three Gorges Dam was opened. Finished at the same year, Dongqichang Project No. 2 is the first and the most renowned pieces in the Dongqichang project. Fish are swimming in the sky and a submarine is emerging among the mountains, which implies that the mountains have been submerged underwater. When asked about his initiative, Shang remarked upon the memorialization of the disappearing Three Gorges. Quote, I feel so sad about the disappearance of the Three Gorges. Unlike the Great Wall or the Forbidden Palace, which are relics of human culture, the Three Gorges is the result of hundreds of millions of years, a masterpiece of nature. Now, due to the decision of the government, which might be wrong from a long-term view, it was submerged underwater. The ecological crisis and natural disaster caused by this kind of behavior might not be felt immediately, but how about in the future? For short-term interest, we abused and ruined the property that belongs to the future generations. I wanted to express my sadness, frustration, and anger in this work. End quote. Shang regards its Dongqichang project theory as a serene expression of the denaturalization of nature and the horrible changes in the relationship between humanity and nature. As Shang realized, the pure nature has been eroded through the process of humans' activity. Therefore, he adopted a worn and vague pattern rooted in the traditional Chinese landscape painting. In 2014, Shang rearranged an old set of work, created Remaring Mountain No1, as seen in the slides. The name is borrowed from the great Yuan master Huang Gongwang's work, as we just saw and discussed. The horizontal layout integrates Chinese traditional hand scroll painting into his work. This work is a tribute to the traditional natural view, at the same time, a condemnation of a man-conquer nature mentality. Remaining Water No1 explicitly responded directly to the Three Gorges Dam project, which is also the most directional practice Shang's thinking on ecological issues. In this work, the found objects, biandan, a tool used by the longshoresmen, water pipes, and steel rulers, are annotated on the canvas as a narrative elements, along with the soundtrack tells the people's life stories before their home were flooded by the reservoir. In his most recent work, Cataract Coordination, a crack unearths, being represented as an aerial view of Yangtze River. The white zones, reminiscent of a satellite image, reminds us of the omnipresent human interference. Subtle details of coordinate can be found along the river. For one indicates the town of the artist's ancestral hometown, which now also have been flooded due to the Three Gorges Dam's construction. This abstract feature gives these paintings a profound and ambiguous expression space. In this space, Shang's thinking on ecological issue reflects a broader spectrum. You can see that Shang's long-term concern to ecological issue in artistic practice is not limited to responding to a specific issue or events. He prefers to treat ecological problems as symptoms arising from a particular social condition dominated by a value system, and visualize those symptoms through images and materials. The Maoist experience continues to affect contemporary political life through the people's crisis of belief in socialism, mistrust of parties' leadership. Much of Chinese societies and leadership holds the conviction that it's now China's turn to enjoy all the benefits of development, and that pollution remediation measures and cleaning up are luxuries that the country cannot yet afford. Their turn towards materialism, short-term benefits, and apparent venality in human relations, all of which encourage rapid and unsustainable exploration of nature. In China, such behavior may not be linked to leftover socialist dogma that government is responsible for all public goods, and a values crisis which leaves citizenry particularly hard-pressed to arrive at a sense of shared responsibility or common concern. Therefore, much of the damage of China's environment was rooted in systemic factors rather than ignorance of importance of environmental issues. On the other hand, the country's difficult past offers a window of hope. The crisis of values has created openness to new ideas and philosophies and evaluation of Chinese tradition. It has created unprecedented receptivity to environmentalism among the Chinese people. In summary, Chinese contemporary ecological art is deeply rooted in Chinese uniqueness, enormous size, remarkable economic growth, and complicated social history. And because of China's overwhelming importance to planetary health, to produce a new generation of environmentalists or participate in global eco movement is essential to the world. Chinese ecological art is introducing new ideas, new materials, forms, and methods to provide provisional and innovative solutions. That is all my talk. Thank you.